From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Steve Levingston, nonfiction editor of the Washington Post Book World, which is a charter sponsor of the National Book Festival. Before we begin, I've been asked to remind you that these events are being recorded by the Library of Congress, which may broadcast them at some future date. After our author's presentation, there will be time for questions from the audience. But if you don't want to be part of the library's permanent collection, it may be best to let someone else ask the questions. The world needs more people like Katherine Paterson. She not only writes award-winning books for young readers, she's twice won the Newbery Medal and the National Book Award. But that's not all. She also pours her passion for books and reading into her role as National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. She herself has been reading almost as long as she's been breathing. She taught herself to read, and by age 4, she loved The House at Pooh Corner. By age 9, her favorite was The Secret Garden. And when she was 12, it was The Yearling. Katherine Paterson found friends between the covers of books. As she has said, "My friends in the books didn't bully me, and they didn't make fun of me, but they did teach me to understand myself better." To Katherine Paterson, it's simply impossible to overstate how important reading is to young people, to families, and to the nation. Relationships grow around an open book. As she says, "My mother read to us when we were small, and I read to my children, and they read to their children. What a wonderful experience for a parent and child to have together. The whole experience of reading together, sitting close to each other, the physical closeness of reading." Katherine Paterson's latest book is The Flint Heart, which she has written with her husband, John Paterson, and John Rocco is the illustrator. John Rocco is also here with us today, so please join me in welcoming Katherine Paterson and John Rocco.
Good afternoon. I hope you all are having as good a time as I'm having at the National Book Festival. I think Dr. Billington did a rain dance an anti-rain dance last night, and so far we've been very lucky today. I'm going to tell you a long story as shortly as I can, because I want you to meet John Rocco. I thought, you see how handsome he is. I thought that would raise the level of the platform considerably. But he's not just good to look at. He's a wonderful artist, a kind and funny human being, and I'm honored to share the stage with John. Thank you. People who know my husband will resonate to the story. I think I have relatives somewhere out there. I was brushing them off a while ago, but they're here, and I'm happy to have them, and they will recognize the characters in the story. My husband fell in love with Margaret Mahy's book, The Catalog of the Universe, some years ago, and it showed his good taste in reading. But then he heard that Margaret Mahy's favorite childhood book, and the book that she wanted to be sure was available for children to read in the 21st century, was a book by Eden Philpotts entitled The Flint Heart. Well, he had never heard of the Flint Heart, and John is one of these people who believes that they will outlive the computer fad. So he went to his friendly neighborhood bookseller and asked him if he would find a copy of this old 1910 book for him. Now, the bookseller knows John, and when he discovered that the book cost $40, he called John and said, "Do you still want it?" And if you know John, you know that's a valid question. We have only one T in Paterson because Scots can't figure out why you'd have to have two when one will do. So He said yes, of course, because this was Margaret Mahy's book. The book came, and he fell totally in love with this really Victorian story, although it was published in 1910. And it became his quest to have the book republished. He took his valuable $40 copy and mailed it off to every publisher he knew, asking them if they didn't want to republish this wonderful story. And they all said no. Finally, he and our son John together wrote a book called Roberto's Trip to the Top, which he suggested I might mention while I was on the stage. And the publisher of that book was Candlewick Press, and his editor was Karen Lotz. So he was sure at last he had an editor with really good taste. So he sent his beloved copy to Karen and said, "Don't you want to republish that?" And Karen said, "I can't republish it the way it is, but I do love the story, and let's see what we can do." And so somehow the three of us decided that we would freely abridge this wonderful fantasy. If you want to see the original book, Google has put it on their free website, and you can read it there. But what we did was, well, this is the way, everybody's curious how husbands and wives work together, right? And I've always said it's more fun than wallpapering with him. But actually, this book was absolute delight. The 4 books we've done together, we've done differently every time. In this case, I said, "John, sit down there, go chapter by chapter, write down what are the essential parts of this chapter for the story and what has to be let go, because it's totally inexplicable to a modern reader." I mean, there were jokes about English politics in the early 20th century. I don't think many of us would understand the punchlines. There were pages of just simply lists of all the fairies that live on Dartmoor, which I don't know about you, but I get a little tired of books with long lists in them. So that's what we did. He would decide what was essential to the story, and I would go upstairs and try to rewrite accordingly. We kept all of Eden Philpott's characters. We kept all of his plot. We kept as much of his wonderful language as possible, and if we couldn't keep it, we imitated it. So if you think this book doesn't sound like a Katherine Paterson book, you're absolutely right. It shouldn't. It should sound like Eden Philpott's Revividus. We had a wonderful experience, and that is, you'll have a treat in just a minute, because Candlewick Press introduced us to John Rocco. And if you have not seen this book, as one of my sisters said, it's a blow for the book in the age when everybody thinks it's going to be obsolete, because it is one of the most beautiful pieces of bookmaking I have ever seen. So please take a look at it, and we don't mind if you buy it. John said I should read a section from the book, and if it goes too long, he'll throw something, a water bottle or something at me, and I'll stop. But I wanted to read you a section where Charles first meets the Pixies. Charles and Unity, his little sister, and the rest of the family have had a terrible time because suddenly their father has changed from a loving father into a terrible, terrible person. And so Unity thinks they should go to the fairies and find out what they should do to bring their father back. So he's just met the fairy named De Quincey and had a little conversation. And this, I'm jumping into the middle of the conversation. After this, there was a long silence. And Charles, who had a kind heart and liked to talk of things that he knew interested people, asked the Pixie about the book he was reading, because he thought the Pixie would be pleased to talk about it. "The work I am perusing happens to be a dictionary," answered the fairy. "There is much pleasure and profit to be won from the pages of a dictionary. I have read and studied every letter of the alphabet, all but Z. You may have observed that I never use any word beginning with the letter Z. The reason is that I have not yet studied it. I know 2 words beginning with Z, said Charles. You surprise me. I should not have expected it. What are they? Zebra and zany, answered Charles. Thank you. I have met the zebra within the pages of natural history, said De Quincey. But zany is unfamiliar to me. What do you mean by it? A chap who plays the clown, who's foolish? Capital, said the fairy. I'm tired of calling the other fairies fools. Now I can call them zanies instead. It will make a nice change. I thought all fairies were sharp as needles, said Charles, quite surprised by the idea of foolish fairies. Far from it. Society of all ranks consists mostly of fools. We people of brains, I include you because you know 2 words beginning with Z. We clever people have to think for those who can't think for themselves. How lucky I am, said Charles, to have met such a wonderful, clever pixie, for if most of them were thick-headed, they wouldn't have helped me. Now I'll tell you why I've come. Then he told De Quincey about his father and how he had changed and how all the children except John, and including Ship, had held a meeting to decide what to do. After we decide on a present, the question was, what should it be? Unity, our little sister, who is 5, suggested that I should come and ask the pixies, and here I am. De Quincey thought for a few moments. He didn't have the slightest idea what kind of present the Jago children should get for Billy Jago, but he pretended that he knew all about it. The problem is not difficult of solution, he said. Many far more profound cases than this have come under my notice, and I've never had anybody find fault with my decisions. But it happens that next Tuesday evening, the Zagabog, a Z by the way, visits us. It will be a brilliant evening with music, recitation, dancing, and a dinner of 38 courses, dessert ices, and the best of wines. That's all very interesting, said Charles, but I'm afraid it won't help me. It may or may not, said De Quincey. That rests with you. The Zagabog, of course, knows everything. I suppose you are aware of that. I've never heard of him. And never heard of his agent in advance, the Snick? Never. Then I withdraw what I said about you being a clever person, said the fairy. I'm very sorry, said Charles, but it was no good pretending I did if I didn't. Not a bit, De Quincey agreed. The Zagabog is easily the best, most brilliant, and the wisest creature in the universe. What he doesn't know doesn't matter. Now, I will tell you what I will do. Our leading statesmen, philosophers, and men of letters have each received permission to bring 1 guest to the banquet. You may come as my guest, and I have little or no doubt that the Zagabog, if I make a favor of it with the Snick, will answer your question. I will be there, but it seems almost too much to have dinner with the king and the Zagabog and the Snick and you. It is dazzling, no doubt, and a great experience for a human boy, agreed De Quincey. You must not, of course, expect to be the guest of the evening. The Zagabog is the lion of the occasion. You will come merely as my friend. But I may tell you that any friend of mine will have a certain amount of attention paid to him. I hope not, said the boy. I only want to sit in the corner and see it all. Or I might help with the dishes. De Quincey was much annoyed by this. You must come in the spirit of a guest, not in the spirit of a footman, he said. You must be as grand and haughty as you know how, out of compliment to me. I need hardly say that we dress for dinner. Of course, said Charles, so do I. Indeed. Forgive me, but I should hardly have expected that you did. Always, said Charles, and also for breakfast and supper. De Quincey was quite impressed and had always felt that dressing for dinner was a matter of pure convention. Why dress for dinner if you don't dress for breakfast? Why indeed, said Charles. There is no explanation. I hope, said the fairy, during the course of the banquet that you will take occasion to mention pretty loudly how you always dress for breakfast. Certainly, if you wish it, said Charles. It will show that you possess the priceless gift of originality and may add to your importance. And now it is my great pleasure to ask John Rocco to come to the platform and tell you how he made the gorgeous pictures.
Can I borrow your book?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Hello. Thrilled to be here. It's not often in your lifetime you meet an angel who walks the earth, and Katherine is certainly one of those. Yes. She just meeting her through this process has been a thrill. Of course, many of you know her books and are familiar with her writings. And if you don't know her as a person, I'm sorry for you, because she is an amazing woman. And I got this amazing opportunity to illustrate this book. And when Candlewick first asked me to do it, and the name Katherine Paterson was in the email, I dropped everything and said, yes, 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 I'll do it. I don't know what it is, but I'll do it. And they sent me the manuscript, and I read it, and suddenly I'm reading about human boys and girls and pixies and talking animals and hot water bottles from Germany named Bismarck. And I thought to myself, this is interesting and challenging. And I think for me, one of the biggest challenges was trying to create a world where they all coexisted. And so that visually was the challenge that I took on in this book. And one of the things I have to say about, we both take our hats off to Candlewick for making such a beautiful book. If you purchase one today, you're going to feel, the first thing you're going to notice is how heavy it is. And that's because they printed every page, even the black and white ones, in full color. So it's beautiful paper, and we had fun designing the interior of the book as well as the exterior, the case cover. And you know, not everyone makes books like this because they're very expensive to make. And I think it's more important to turn books into art objects with this ever-growing apps and digital books out there. I think it's important to have books in our lives. And whenever I walk into a house where I don't see any books, I immediately feel very, very uncomfortable. I don't know what it is, but as soon as I see a bookshelf, it puts me at ease. And it says, oh, okay, you're with good people. They read books. So being part of this process and making such a beautiful object was an honor and a thrill. And I'm very excited to be here. And thank you, Katherine, for inviting me on stage with you in your angelness. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
When John was talking about my angelness, I was hoping my relatives in the audience were not listening, since they know a lot better than that. John, I think it'd be good if you just tell how you did these wonderful illustrations. Sure. Just the process.
Sure. Well, the process that I did for this, at first was just to read the manuscript, of course, and introduce myself to all these amazing characters and this world that they live in, and then try to come up with what I thought they would look like. And that started with character sketches and drawings, and then as that developed, I worked with Candlewick in deciding where we were going to put the images. And once I had an idea of where the images would fall in the book, I could decide what each picture would look like and what I would describe with each picture. The way I work is that I draw everything in pencil first, and then I paint and add the colors digitally. And I know I'm just talking about books and the digital age and everything else, and there I go making my art with computers. But nonetheless, that's how I do it. And so in the end, you'll have a pencil drawing that has been colored digitally. And for me, this process works really well because I can look at the book as a whole and balance the colors and really go back and play with them and not have to wait for anything to dry, which helps. And those of you who work with computers know that Command-Z can be a good friend. So these are some of the images that you'll see in the book. And there's approximately about 60 pieces of art in the book. Originally, the plan was about 24 pieces of art, but then when they told me they're printing the whole book in color, I just kept going, because I said, well, let's put some art there and some art there, and it was a lot of fun. And on the back of the book's a wonderful quote from Eden Philpotts from another book, but John said it made perfect sense for this book. And the quote is, "The universe is full of magical things, patiently waiting for our wits to grow sharper," which I think is very appropriate for this book. Does that pretty much cover it?
When Candlewick suggested John Rocco as an artist, I'm sorry to say that the name didn't ring a big bell for me, so I went to his website and I looked at it and I thought, this man can obviously do anything. Sure. I'm sure he can do this book. And we have just been, my husband John and I have a family of Johns. We're glad to add John Rocco to our family. Just every time we saw a sketch or a picture, we were more and more convinced that this was the genius that we wanted to bring Eden Philpotts back to life. Just a word about John. I first met him face-to-face at the Book Expo in New York last May. And I never met him before, and he said to me, "I have a present for you." And he brought me this huge orange linen-covered, I would say, box, and in it were 5 paintings from the Flint Heart, this big. So I thought, I think the title Angel goes on some other head than mine. We wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, and I think we have for a change. So if you'll step up to the mic and you won't fuss if you are on the LOC website, then we would be delighted, either John or I, to answer whichever question is appropriate.
You may also want to announce what time you're signing.
I don't know what time I'm signing.
1 o'clock.
Oh, John says I should say that I'm signing at 1 o'clock. And what time are you signing? Oh, John is going to sign with me. So, I'm sorry, it's not on my schedule. We just decided. Okay, there's someone over here.
How did you get your idea for Bridge to Terabithia?
Should I answer that?
Not your question, John. I wrote Bridge to Terabithia because our son David's best friend, when he was 7 and 8 years old, was a girl named Lisa Hill. And very tragically, the summer that they were both 8 years old, Lisa was struck and killed by lightning. And it was such a terrible experience. And so, I mean, who could believe that a child, a little girl, dancing on a rock above a beach on a day that was sunny, there was thunder so far off in the distance that the lifeguards hadn't cleared the beach. There she was, dancing on a rock, very typical of Lisa, and she was struck and killed by lightning. And I couldn't explain this tragedy to my son. I couldn't explain it to myself. And so I thought, I'll have to write a story because stories have to make sense, even when life doesn't seem to make sense. And so I began to write a story. I knew that if I wrote this story about a friendship between a boy and a girl was going to die in the story. And I did everything I could not to let her die. I stopped writing. That was the only way I could keep her alive. So a friend said to me one day, well, what are you working on? And I usually won't talk about what I'm working on, but I just blurted out, I'm trying to write a story about a friendship between a boy and a girl. And the girl is going to die, and I don't think I can face Lisa's death again. And she said, because she knew I'd had cancer that same year, she said, I don't think it's your death you can't face. I don't think it's Lisa's death you can't face. I think it's yours. So I thought, if it's my death that I have to face, then I have to finish the book. So.
That's a good inspiration.
Thank you. I guess we should go from side to side. So we'll take this side now.
This one is actually for John Rocco. A couple years ago, I read and reread Rick Riordan's The Lightning Thief series over and over and over again. And I followed his blog religiously. And I recognized your name when that came up. And then I remembered, oh my God, he was the guy who made the cover for The Lightning Thief and all those books. So what I wanted to know was, how did you draw those amazing covers?
I'll try to make it quick. Basically, when they asked me to redo the cover for The Lightning Thief, I had never illustrated a cover before, and so I didn't know what they should look like. So I read the book, and from the book, I derived a feeling from it. And so a lot of times those covers are more about what I feel after I read the book than... So that first cover is about a boy who's stuck between Zeus and Poseidon in this battle, and he feels all by himself, so that's why he's there by himself in that ocean and storm pressing in on him. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And thanks.
And also my mom wanted to say to Katherine Paterson that your book was the first book that she ever cried about, so...
Give your mother my regards. Over on this side.
Hi, my question's for Katherine. I'm thinking of the characters from Jacob Have I Loved, and I feel like those characters are real people. In fact, I started to talk about them like they were real people. How do you catalog all these specific details about them? How do you come up with them?
Oh my. Well, you know, to tell the truth, the only person whose feelings that I really know well enough to write about is myself. So the feelings of Louise in that book will have to be feelings that somehow I have experienced. And that doesn't make me proud, because when I was writing the book, I was furious with Louise for being so stupid. But, and I really thought I was writing about somebody else. And then I thought, if I'm writing about somebody else, why am I so angry every day when I go to work? So I must have some unresolved feelings of jealousy that I haven't been willing to face up to. And I've often said that writing a novel is a lot cheaper than psychotherapy. But yes, I mean, I can't write about a person who is very jealous if I have not ever experienced jealousy on a very deep level. So people always want to know how autobiographical the books are, and there's no book that's really autobiographical in the sense that the incidents in the book, the things that happen to the characters, are really things exactly from my life. But unfortunately, all the feelings are autobiographical.
My question is for John. What software do you use to do the illustrations?
I use Photoshop. Yeah.
CS5?
I'm sorry?
CS5?
Jeez. You know? Yes, I believe it is.
Thanks.
Yeah. Which software do you use?
Microsoft for Mac. It's not working very well right now. I can't print on both sides of the page anymore.
For Ms. Paterson, thank you so much for the many wonderful books that you've given us over the years. I've read all of them, and you've been a hero of mine for a long time. It's the inevitable question, I'm afraid, but I wanted to ask who you're reading right now and who you are enjoying reading right now.
Well, I belong to a book club, and
Of course you do.
yeah. And I've read some wonderful books through that club. And at our last meeting, one of the members of the club said, you know, we usually all read the same book. And she said, what about for next week? We all choose a book about sisters or sisters and brothers, and they just share how different the books are as they deal with siblings. And one of our leaders said, but I'm an only child. So we said, imagine, Grace, imagine. But so I thought, you know, what book about siblings? And there are a lot of books on the market, either memoirs or novels about siblings, but I thought, this is my big chance to reread Sense and Sensibility. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Jane Austen, in case any of you, Austen. And no, she will not be available for autographing.
Thank you very much.
Let's see, over the side.
Well, how do you organize your books? Like, how do you, like...
How do I
organize them? Like,
how do I organize?
Yeah.
Just look at me. Do you think I'm an organized person?
Like, how do you come up, like how you don't...
Are you asking, how do I start with characters or plot? Or
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question. And unfortunately, the answer is I start wherever I can. Sometimes, when I was writing Jacob If I Loved, that I talked about just a moment ago, I thought, I want to write about, and I wasn't sure if it was sisters before or sister to brother, because I said, you know, if you look at the Bible, and, you know, I was raised on the Bible. I'm sorry, I was raised on the Bible. And I think, and I'm very grateful for it. So I'm just apologizing for you that don't think that's a good thing. And I thought, you know, you read the Bible. We're the kind of people who think that all the problems are between parents and children. But if you read the Bible, the first murder is one brother kills the other. And then Jacob steals his brother's birthright, and his brother wants to kill him. And then Jacob marries two sisters. One of them is very jealous of the other. And I thought, you know, I'm missing the boat. The real struggle is between siblings. It's not between parents and children. So I think I'll do that. I didn't realize that I have some blatant jealousy problems. I started with an idea, and then I had to go inside. And I didn't know where these people were going to live. I couldn't get anywhere on it. And then one Christmas, one of my wonderful sisters gave my son John a copy of Beautiful Swimmers, which is a book about the watermen on the Chesapeake Bay. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm trying to write about a lonely adolescent. Put her on an island in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, and she really will feel alone. So that was just a gift to me, to find out where these people lived. Sometimes I start out with where they live and wonder who the characters are. So it's almost a different story with every book. I wish I were more organized, and maybe I could write more books if I were better organized. But that's sort of the way it is. But I think every writer has to find her own way, and I'm guessing you're a writer. Over here.
Oh, is Leslie's death in any other way symbolic other than Lisa's death?
I'm sorry, I'm an elderly person and I don't hear very well. Could you speak right into the mic?
Sorry. Okay. Does that work? Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Anyway, is Leslie's death in any other way symbolic other than Lisa's death?
Now, other than Lisa's death, what am I answering here?
Is it symbolic?
Is it symbolic?
Is it symbolic? You know, I had 4 kids, and they all went through this course called literary analysis. And they would come home and they'd say, when writers put all those symbols in books, do they know what they're doing? And I said, not if they're good writers. So I think what happens is that your subconscious provides the symbol in a way, but the real person who provides that is the reader. The reader sees what this book means to herself or to himself. And that's why I love being a writer, because you get readers who make your story better than you could have ever made it.
Thank you.
Were any of your books based on childhood memories?
Well, childhood feelings, certainly. Childhood feelings, but not so much memories. I had a very, well, some people think it was an extremely interesting childhood, but it was so weird that you couldn't turn it into fiction because nobody would believe it. So I would say it was based on childhood feelings, but not on memories as such.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Miss Patterson, is any way that you're related to James Patterson?
No, I would be dressed a lot better than I am. and he has that extra T.
And Mr. John, how do you make the covers of the Percy Jackson's and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief so detailed and wonderful?
Oh, thank you. A sharp pencil. That helps with the detail. I don't know. You know, sometimes when you make art, you just go with your gut, and so that's what I do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I wanted to ask, the two of you seem to have a very genial relationship, even though it's brand new. We were here a couple of years ago.
We're dating.
You realize, of course, he's the age of my children.
We were here a couple of years ago, and we saw a presentation by John Sheska and David Shannon, and they had a wonderful relationship. But one of the things I found interesting...
That's because they're dating.
I found interesting about what you've been saying about what they said is very often the illustrator never is in contact or communicates with the writer of a book.
That's true.
And I find that
That's the more usual.
amazing.
That's the more usual relationship.
And so, was that the case with you? And if
No.
so, is it easier?
He didn't need us to do his beautiful pictures. Come on. I'm not going to tell him how to do it.
Well, yeah, and then David Shannon mentioned that it was so the authors didn't bully them, but I find that hard to believe. I would think that it would be very helpful to an illustrator to hear from an author.
Would you really like to have more of a relationship with the author when you're doing illustrations?
I think sometimes it depends on the book. Like with the Rick Riordan covers, over time, you know, I've done, I don't know, I guess about 11 covers so far for his books. And it wasn't until maybe the 3rd or 4th cover that I actually met him. And now we talk about it beforehand, before the cover's made. Sometimes we talk about the story, what might make a good cover. And you know, he's a pretty bright guy, and he definitely is generous with his time towards that. So it depends. A lot of times, you know, you're an illustrator because that's what you do. So you're going to bring your thing to it. And sometimes an author and an illustrator not talking to each other is helpful. Other times it's better if they do talk to each other. In this case, I'm very glad to know Katherine, and hopefully we can do more books together.
So do I. Me. Well, I said, just give me a good idea. So he started on this great idea while we were up at the tent, the author's tent. And I said, but you're such a good writer, you can do that by yourself. You don't need me. Because he is a wonderful writer. And I hope you'll see his newest picture book called Blackout. It's wonderful. It's just such a warm, wonderful family book. Everybody's got to have Blackout. We've usually not known, I've usually not known illustrators. One exception was when Susan Jeffers was going to illustrate a book my husband and I did together called Blueberries for the Queen. And Susan and I had been friends many years ago, for many years. And Susan she didn't pay any attention to any rules. She just came to our house. And if you will look in the title page of that house, there's a scene, and that little red house up there, that's my house, which doesn't belong in Massachusetts, but it's a little author's secret there. And she said she wanted to come because it's really my husband's story. He actually gave blueberries to the Queen of the Netherlands when he was 10 years old. And so she wanted to hear John tell his own story, not the fictionalized version, but his own story. And she said that inspired her because she saw the light in his eyes and she knew just how to paint the little boy in the story. So I love that story.
I think we have time for one more question.
One more question. We're getting the flashcards down here. I think, which side
Girl
are we
Scouts or Moby Dick? I think this side just asked the question, or was it this side? I don't know. Sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, what is the inspiration for the title of the book, The Day of the Pelican?
Actually, I had given it 3 other titles. And it was the publisher who came up with that title. And I thought, what? The Day of the Pelican? Well, there is a story early on in the book where Mila draws a pelican that kind of looks like her teacher and gets in trouble at school, and that causes a lot of trouble later on. And I thought, but people forget about that by the time they get to the end of the book. So actually, I went back and stuck some more references to the pelican. So if they're going to name it the Day of the Pelican, it would seem to make sense to the reader.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all so much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.